Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing well. Today I have Rick McCracken. If you might have seen him on his Cardano Effect podcast, that's where you know him from. So we're going to talk about Cardano, all things Shelley, and the Incentivized Testnet, amongst other things. So Rick, welcome to the channel. Thanks for being here.
Hashoshi, thanks for having me on. I very much appreciate it. This is an upgrade for me. Higher price real estate over here on your channel.
Hey, awesome, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I would love if you could give just some brief background about how you got into Cardano, what you're all about, what you do, and let people know.
Okay, sure. Yeah, just a little background on myself. I'm retired military. I'm retired military senior chief petty officer, and I teach oceanography. That's what I do. Most of it keeps me busy during the days. I'm
Cool.
not a DevOps guy, but working with Cardano and setting up nodes does get me into the DevOps side of the house, but it's a learning process. And where I first got in touch with Cardano is early to mid 2017. I was tinkering with Ethereum and looking at different cryptocurrencies. And right before the bull run really hit in probably September, October of 2017, I caught that video from Charles Hoskinson about Cardano. And
Yeah.
my sons and I were talking about it, and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting concept to take that approach with having formal methods, formal verification, and the scientific background, and doing it, basically building it right from the ground up. And I was really impressed, and that's when I got into Cardano. And I started making YouTube videos. I have a different, my channel over there, Digital Fortress. And I started doing general cryptocurrency, a little bit on hardware wallets, a little bit of other cryptocurrencies, but I didn't know much about them. And, it wasn't a full-time thing for me. So I really caught on to Cardano. And I liked, we had Sebastian's videos. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I'd watch other channels. And I go, I think I can make videos. So then I started making videos. And that was cool. Awesome. I really have fun doing, because I teach during the day, and making YouTube videos is teaching, is really what you're doing, and it's what I love, and that's what you do. You teach people through YouTube videos. It's a great way of getting information out there, and that's what really got me into Cardano. And then I started learning more and more about it. I had novice level knowledge of Bitcoin and how it worked. I had intermediate level knowledge of mining, because we ran miners here. Basic, miners, nothing but, GPU miners. Pretty simple to set up, pretty easy to do. And then once I got into Cardano, there was a lot more to learn. So yeah, that's a little bit of background. So I tried to be brief, but
No worries, man.
So that's how I got into Cardano. And I think it was Charles Hoskinson's videos what really hooked me. I was very impressed.
Awesome. So, I mean, you've been a loyal Cardano supporter since, things really started kicking off, and that's awesome. Are you a Cardano ambassador?
Yeah. Yep. I'm a Cardano ambassador, and you are as well. Yes.
I am. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And for anyone curious, that does not mean we're sponsored by Cardano. That just means that we like the project, we support the project, and we create content about the project of our own free will and accord. So there's that. So let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this episode. I really wanted to talk a lot about Shelley, with the staking and incentives that's coming to the network, as well as your involvement in the Incentivized Testnet, which is really a place where people have been able to test those features out before they make their way into mainnet. So with that, I wanted to kick it over to you. If you could give your elevator pitch style explanation of what the Incentivized Testnet is all about, and
Sure.
That would be great.
Sounds good. Okay. So quick description here. The testnet started with the self-node testnet mid last year in 2019, where just getting up and running on different types of hardware and getting people familiar with what they're looking at on their hardware and how it runs. Then it shifted over to late September, early October of 2019, the network phase testnet, where we were connecting the nodes and doing network checks. And at that point, there was probably, my estimate, probably 60 to 80 people involved on a regular basis via Telegram, involved with the folks from IOHK in setting up the network phase. Then the Incentivized Testnet kicked off in mid-December. I think it was about December 13th or 14th. The pool operators brought their nodes up in the incentivized mode. Then from there on, we went through iterations of the software improving the testnet over time as we went through it. And at the same time, keep in mind, we were testing from September through mid-December, late September through mid-December, with about 80 to 100 people. It kind of expanded to maybe 150, 200, just a guess, just an estimate, you know, put a rough, soft number on it. But then once things got hot, man, in late December, people said it's working. Boom, and people started jumping on it, and it grew rapidly to 200, 300, 400, 500, you know. And now there's over 800 wallets you can actively see in Daedalus. You can look at over 1,000, not wallets, correction, nodes in Daedalus, and 1,000 nodes listed on Pool Tool. It's like over 1,020 now. So very rapid expansion. That's 6 nodes running behind me. Those are the nodes running here. There you go.
Beautiful.
Just I have different colors because I'm old and I forget stuff, and the different colors keeps me from screwing things up.
Yeah, it helps you manage terminal windows, that's for sure. I can't tell you, I have like 12 open on my computer right now in development, and I lose track of it all the time. They all look the same.
They do, especially when they have the same data scrolling through them. So it started off rough. Okay, the testnet started off, it was a little bit painful when it went to the ITN because, and here's my general description. We knew we wanted to do it, but the people as a whole, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for all the pool operators, but the other pool operators probably have a parallel experience to mine. Okay. But in general, it felt like it started off rough, but it was necessary. That's just how new things are made. If there's no pain, there's no gain. Yeah. And we were like, we wanted to do it, but we didn't feel like we were ready. And you know, it was reflecting back at the time, it was painful, but it was also good learning. You know, no pain, no gain. It was good learning. But it's almost like Charles had to push everybody off the cliff and see if they sink or swim. Yeah. And then people started swimming. Some of them sunk a little bit and then started swimming again. But it was, we had to go through that. It was a necessary thing to do, to get it going, right? And now looking back on it, I go, you know what? We had to go through that. It was something that we had to do. But the iterations of the software over the next couple of weeks got better and better. More nodes came online. They had to look at the response, at how it worked. Now it's running pretty good. I mean, look at that right there. It's cruising, just cooking away. Let me check real quick. They're in sync. Woohoo! Right?
Can't lose, man. Yeah, yeah, man. And I mean, for people that, you know, might be sitting here like, well, okay, so you have the community running nodes to test new software before it goes to mainnet. Cool. Yeah. The incentivized part, correct me if I'm wrong, basically means that if you are a stake pool operator and your pool is a block validator, right? You make a block, you're going to get rewarded, right? When this stuff goes to mainnet, the incentives that you've earned inside this testnet will reflect to you when it goes to mainnet. Am I wrong on that, or am I correct in that?
You're correct. You're correct. So whatever your ADA that you brought onto the testnet, that came into existence on the testnet, those just stay there. But the rewards that came back from your delegation and your staking, those will reappear on the mainnet in the future whenever it's all transferred back to mainnet. So the rewards go back onto the mainnet.
So, you know, another clever and interesting thing that I think came, it's fairly unique to Cardano. I'm sure there are other examples of projects that have done this type of testnet where they've incentivized, you know, everyday users to go and try and use it and try and break it and try and, you know, give feedback by allowing you to earn the native cryptocurrency by doing so, right? So I think you talked about it before, that the methods that they've used within IOHK to develop Cardano have been extremely traditional scientific method style, formal verification. This is like an academic programming project. And in that regard, it's been slow. And people get really frustrated in the space about delays and things not working, when in reality, I think for me personally as a developer, I need stuff to break so that I can figure out how to fix it. And even more so in the crypto world and decentralized network world, if it doesn't work the first time you go to mainnet and then you decide we want to fix it, you've lost all credibility and all your users go away. And I don't think a lot of times people recover from that. So I'd rather these test nets take time and things get fixed so that the mainnet experience is smooth for all these folks. What are your thoughts?
I agree. And I think there's an important distinction people need to understand is the current version of the incentivized testnet is the Rust version, not the Haskell version. The Rust version isn't going through as much of the process as Haskell. I don't know all the levels of detail, but the Rust is being done on purpose so that the engineers can build very quickly and see how people respond to the different features. They can put different features in wallet. The last wallet that came out has new features in there. They can do that quickly with Rust and JavaScript and whatever. I'm not a programmer, of course, but they put them in there. The Haskell side is the one that goes through the formal verification and all that work and the security audits. Now the Rust is being built to spec though. So there is a lot of parallel effort. The Rust is being built to spec. It is going through some QA, but it has to be more rapid. And that is the key. Yeah. They had to rapidly build and to get it out there so people can test it. Then all of that information is collected and fed back into the Haskell version. So the Haskell version is deployed on the testnet. That's what's going to happen next. There's probably a few more Rust iterations that'll come out. Then the Haskell iteration will go onto the testnet, and that will be to train the pool operators on the differences with the Haskell version to understand it, learn it, get it right before it goes to mainnet.
Right. So, I mean, and this is critical stuff too, because we're moving from, the existing chain that's out there right now. We're on the Byron chain. And I guess we have sort of an extended version of consensus people are comfortable with today, right? In Byron. But now we're moving towards the true vision for what a proof of stake environment would look like within the Cardano world, right? And that's what Shelley is all about. That's what this incentivized testnet's all about. It's how can we use the native cryptocurrency ADA to act as like a social lever, right? Or an incentive lever to make people, average people, block makers in the actual mainnet version, right?
Yes, that's something that's very interesting. All right. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. So on the mainnet, someone who's staking, a delegator, is doing the same thing as running a miner. It has the same effect. Like I used to run a proof of work miner, and I would point it at a pool, and the miner, if it hit a block, you know how that works. The pool would collect all the processing power from the miners and all that kind of stuff. And then it was distributed, right? Well, with Cardano, it's more automated. Even now, at this point in the testnet, it's much better. So each person delegating is a miner, and the pool is also a miner, but is the point where the network's actually running. And that's what you want to stay on 24/7, right? Whereas the people delegating can go offline, but their stake still performs work. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting.
And it's amazing. It's working. Like the Ouroboros, I'm like, holy cow, this thing's working. So even though it was a little rough earlier on, it was still working, and I was amazed. And that kept me motivated. And I think it kept a lot of pool operators motivated to keep pushing forward, because all of the papers and the information that was put out about Cardano earlier, they saw it come to life. And that's a very motivating and inspirational thing.
Yeah, and I think too that Cardano is unique in the sense that, at least to me, there was enough time spent writing the papers that came out about the spec that they're building to the spec because they already know that it's feasible. And I feel like there are a lot of yellow papers and white papers that come out for crypto projects where they speak very generally, or they talk about, even if they go deep into detail, there's formulas about the probabilities and the math behind the consensus. A lot of it's still theory at that point. It's still, we think that this will work, but until you do the research about how users interact with the consensus mechanism, you never know if it's going to work or not. And I think a lot of that mathematical research that they had to do on Ouroboros was done when the paper was written. So now they've been able to build to it, which has been challenging, I'm sure. And that's where we are today. And your point about Rust and JavaScript as like a great quick fire language, you're totally right, because Rust even more so, I think, than JavaScript, besides the fact that it takes some skill to build up to that point. But Rust is sort of like a language that is sort of secure by secure in nature, secure by nature, and allows you to build code rapidly that executes efficiently. It's great for POCs and building something. But then you can push towards a really, really hard-nosed functional language like Haskell, which is what pretty much everything related to Cardano is built from. You can do that pretty easily because you have the theory behind it, right?
You can. And you know, I love how you explain things because you're a developer who can explain things to my level and I can understand it. And that's a great skill to have. But I'd like to give you an example. Okay. There's the Rust code and the Haskell. And the Haskell is the one going to mainnet, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like constructing a gigantic building in the middle of a city. You can't just build a building. You got to build the scaffolding and then build the building, then build the scaffolding and the cranes and build the building. And the scaffolding and the cranes is like the Rust code. And the building that you're constructing is the Haskell code. So when the building is done being constructed, we're going to bring down the scaffolding and the cranes and boom, you got a good functional building. That's what analogy. Okay?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you.
So it's not like you just throw the Rust code in the trash and it was worthless. That's not the case. It's, very important that we go through this process. And I had no idea. This is all learning process for me.
Yeah, and I think too that, every development team does things differently. But for me, I think this way of doing it is very similar to how I build software. And that is, I have a list of functionality and I have, I'm not building protocols, so I'm not claiming that I do, but I build much less complicated stuff than that. But I'll build a proof of concept with JavaScript really quickly, right? Really as simple syntax as possible. I like ES6 JavaScript because it's really easy to read. And then once I prove the concept and show that I can make this work, then I will start tearing it back a little bit and I'll rewrite for security, for efficiency. I'll do load testing and all those things. And then I build from that framework that I've built. And I think it's the same way that this software is being built, just at a much larger scale. So this does happen in industry. So no worries there, guys. This is nothing new. Definitely. So I also did want to touch on another point here with Shelley and the timeline. From your perspective, what's your best guess about when we see the full testnet move and then subsequently a mainnet deployment for Shelley? I know we have no way of telling for sure, but
best guess, late April to mid-May possible for a mainnet with the Haskell. The OBFT hard fork is coming around Feb 20 or so. The Haskell testnet, I think, will be out in March. It may need 2 months of testing, so that'd be March, April. That would push it into May. Yeah. Right? Because it's going to have to go through the gauntlet on the testnet, right? It's got to get punished first. Totally. So mid-May-ish, and then mid-May, you're looking at possible Shelley.
That would be fantastic. And I think, too, that as soon as we start, making that move, that starts to make the basis of the Cardano chain pretty close to the paper, right? In terms of the concrete functionality that was talked about in the original spec. Then the next thing that's coming is obviously the Goguen stuff, which is allowing for smart contract execution and some of the programmatic side of it from an end user perspective. So allowing people to build decentralized applications on top of this now more decentralized and more efficient proof of stake chain that they have in Shelley.
Yes, and there will be a couple different flavors of Ouroboros as we go through, because there were many, many, many papers. There's over 46 papers. There's over 40 papers last time I checked. Several different papers on Ouroboros. You have one for privacy, you have Crypsinos, you got some for identity, you got one for time, Ouroboros Chronos. And these different variants, I'm not sure the exact engineering of them, but as that functionality is needed and is implemented, it'll be launched out there, and you'll just see more and more capability implemented with Ouroboros. It's not something the user sees on the surface. It's something running in the background that makes it more capable. So I forget which one we're running on. I think we're on either Genesis or Genesis on here. I don't remember. I forget.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on there.
There's a lot. There's a lot of different ones. Hydra, right? But the next big phase we're looking at is Goguen with smart contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's
Yep.
something you're familiar with, right? With Ethereum, yes?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of my job today is building out smart contracts with Solidity mostly, which is native to Ethereum. I've done a little bit of work with Viper, which is similar to Python, but for Ethereum, and can be um, compiled and executed on the Ethereum virtual machine. So that's another interesting language, more functional than Solidity is in terms of the way the language is structured, not in terms of functional like it works. Both work.
Hmm.
But Plutus, which is the language that's being built out for these Goguen updates and Cardano, is a pure functional language based off of Haskell that should bring really tightly executed and predictable smart contracts to the mix, which would be cool. And from what I understand, we're going to have a way to write single stream code. So you can write your off-chain Haskell code and your on-chain Haskell code. So you can build out APIs and execute them all from the virtual machine on Cardano's ecosystem, which should be really cool.
All in line. I've seen demos of that from Plutus Fest on how that works. I don't understand it, but it looked cool. I'm sure
Yeah,
you
for
understand
sure.
it well.
And Haskell is one of those things where the people who write with Haskell, and I would say a lot of, if not most of the people that use Haskell and swear by it are, some of the OG computer science guys and girls, the, really pure functional programming geeks that love this type of language. I've been slowly learning Haskell myself because I don't know it, and I hadn't learned it before Plutus came into the mix from the paper. And when I don't have full time to devote to it, it takes time to learn. It's a challenging language, but I understand, and I'm understanding more and more why decisions were made within Cardano to use Haskell, because it's very much a polar opposite of a lot of the languages that are used in something like Solidity, which is very much like a JavaScript or C language style. Gives you a lot. There are a lot of trapdoors that you can fall into when you have so much freedom and ability to write yourself into bad errors. So
Yeah.
there's that tech talk on the language stuff.
Yep. I remember in summary, the best way I remember it is you want the computer program or the computer language to do exactly what you want it to do and nothing more and nothing less. And
Yeah.
the trapdoors come in where it does something a little more or less than what you wanted it to do, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean the true, I guess the simplest line you can draw between a functional language like a Haskell and a totally non-functional, very imperative language is that a functional language, you as the programmer are telling the computer what you want it to do, like what the result you want is, right? You tell it, here's what I need you to do. Cool. And then it does it. In terms of an imperative language, you're telling the computer what you want it to do, but you also tell it every single step that it needs to take to get there. So now you've introduced way more opportunity for errors. You have a little bit more flexibility and more freedom, which is also nice, but there's drawbacks to both.
Yeah. So when I think about it, what does that bring to the user? It kind of makes me think to the user, it's relatively transparent, but there should be a little bit more of a warm fuzzy when it comes to, is it secure? Is it going to work correctly? That's what we're anticipating. At least that's what I think we're going to see. Is that a fair assumption or a fair expectation that for me to anticipate it's going to work better or it's going to work the way it's supposed to?
Yeah, I think that's the key is the predictability and the fact that that, for example, DeFi right now, huge within Ethereum, decentralized finance. You have to trust, assuming contracts might not be open source fully, what have you, you have to trust that these folks that are handling potentially millions of dollars worth of value in crypto, that their contracts were built to a secure, airtight standard. And to be fair with you, a lot of times bugs that come up or trapdoors that show up in Solidity code, people didn't realize they weren't in the best practices. They followed the best practices at the time, but those contracts live in perpetuity. So someone might find a vulnerability that no one knew was there, right? with a language that's very functional, where it's very deterministic, you know exactly what's going to happen when you do this. Every time you put in the same value, the same thing comes out, right? It's good. It's what you want. In a verifiable language like a Haskell, there's so much less that can go wrong from feeding data in to getting data out, and gives you that comfort knowing that the developer pretty much has to build airtight code. There's just more guardrails put up in that regard. So that's, I wonder, simplifying, of course.
No, I'm glad you simplified that, because that makes me wonder if, come Goguen, when smart contracts are deployed on Cardano, if that will give the users the ability to use it the way it's intended and described without something going wrong. Because there have been a couple of problems recently with some of the projects where someone got money out of it and it shouldn't have been there. I think it had to. I can't remember which one it had to do with, but it was just last week.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. So you want the users to have a good experience and not have to worry about bugs and flaws. And something that kind of makes me wonder about is with, let's say you're deploying smart contracts on Plutus and it provides a feature or function I'm looking for, like some sort of investment methodology or a token or a coupon or whatever runs on the smart contract. And it can be checked by other developers that it does work the way it's supposed to, and they don't find bugs in there. Is that somehow easier so that you can build user confidence and are not worried about, getting scammed or ripped off or something going crazy with the code and they lose their money? That's what people worry about. Like, if I use that, am I going to lose my money?
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think that inherently, trust in the language and the amount of room there is for significant errors that are not purposeful, right? Like, purposefully poorly written code, it happens. Developers that want to build secure code and are trying to, think there's more tools and more inherent security and purity in languages like Haskell than you would have in JavaScript, which can be secure 100%. It just, you need to know all the best practices, and JavaScript changes far less than Solidity does. And the execution environments for JavaScript change far less often. Node.js doesn't change all that often. I know what to expect and how to write secure code, and I only have to learn that on a cadence. Whereas Solidity is changing so fast, and languages in this space are changing so fast because of the nascency of the technology, that even a developer that has all the best practices down from version 0.4 of Solidity, now in 0.6, where we are today, and beyond, they might completely miss something because they just haven't gotten back to the knowledge level that they were at on the old version. And gas prices and gas costs and the implications for security there, or like reentrancy and crazy stuff like that, that's where Cardano needs to take lessons learned and say, within IOHK, we're going to build this language out so that there are far fewer places where the developer can accidentally and without intent create a contract that exposes value that's other users' property, right? That's, I think, the goal. And hopefully we see that in, this year. I know a lot of the work that's being done on Shelley and this, the incentivized testnet, then the full testnet and Haskell and the mainnet. A lot of this work has been done in parallel with stuff for Goguen and smart contracts. Is that your understanding as well?
That is correct. If you go onto the CardanoUpdates.org.com website, you'll see that there are 3 parallel efforts right now, and there's probably more. But with the wrap up of the incentivized testnet, I mean, we're in the later phases of the incentivized testnet. We're transitioning to Haskell. That's going on. There's also Hydra is being tested, or at least simulated. There's simulations being done on Hydra. The Plutus Playground has been out there for well over a year.
Yep.
14, 16 months. The Plutus Playground has been out there. All of these efforts are going on in parallel. So you should see the building blocks coming together a little more rapid pace, because Cardano has been beat up pretty hard for being delayed, and it's understandable. And I think a lot of people have learned a lot from that. And, the users have learned to be patient and the managers have learned to give better estimates on the timelines, right? And it was all a
Yeah.
learning and growing process. 10 years from now, we'll look back on this and go, wow, we had to go through it. It was painful, but we did it.
Yeah, for sure.
We did it.
And I think
And
a lot of people in the community, that both that are supporters of Cardano or critics of Cardano, and that's normal and healthy. And I'm happy that there's a dichotomy between those two. I think that something that is unanimous is that it's disappointing when you see delays happening on roadmap promises that are made, and that's partially a communication thing. It's communicating when there are delays and not committing to deadlines that we're not sure we can make. Totally fair. But I also think about it like this, as a fan of the larger space and someone who builds a lot of stuff on Ethereum dApp wise. Until Ethereum 2.0 comes out in totality, I'm not just talking about the beacon chain launch, which should happen this year, probably May or June. Until we see like the full shebang, the whole solution, 2021 probably, optimistically, for Ethereum 2.0 with sharding and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that projects like Cardano, like Zilliqa, like Icon, like Aeon, all of these projects, I don't think that they have to put something out there that's not ready or feel pressure to release stuff until then, because the real competition is going to come from Ethereum 2.0, and it's going to stack up like the third generation blockchain networks like a Cardano against the next generation version of Ethereum, right? Those are going to be the real, clash of titans, if you will. So 2020, 2021, as long as the core stuff gets released in that window, I think we're okay, personally.
yeah. And you know what was a pleasant surprise with the incentivized testnet for me? Ethereum has a lot of developers, and I didn't know how many developers were already involved with Cardano. I had no idea. They're just people that I talked to on Telegram, people that I talked to on the podcasts, and then when the incentivized testnet launched in a decentralized state, the developers were already there. I was like, wow, these people I've been talking to on Telegram, just chit chat, casual talk. They're like, oh, here's a Pegasus app. Boom, Pegasus tool. Here's Pool Tool. Here's the adapools.org website.
Yeah.
And this stuff, I'm like, wow, what's going to happen when we launch smart contracts, man? It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out, that I was very impressed and very happy about that. And as much pain and agony that we got to go through with the incentivized testnet, there are wins along the way, and those wins along the way make it worthwhile. And there are critics out there. We need those critics. You'd mentioned that earlier. Critics are good. They help improve things. There are times where, I can be a critic, and there are times where someone else is a critic and they kind of annoys me. But then after I think about it for a couple minutes, or maybe the next day, I go, you know what, that guy's right. Yeah, and it kind of sets in. But whenever a critic tells you something that doesn't fit your paradigm, sometimes the first response is, you're telling me I'm wrong, right? That's what you're getting from the critic. Yeah, you become defensive, or I become defensive. I can only speak for myself. And then you realize later, you go, maybe that person was right, because now that I think about it, that does kind of make more sense than what I used to be thinking it was, right?
Yeah.
So the critics are very helpful. Sometimes critics are just annoying because they want to be, but usually when it comes to scientific and the engineering and development side of the house, it is very helpful. And that's why the Cardano papers prior to the incentivized testnet, very early on in the game, they were peer reviewed. That's where it all started, was getting those white papers peer reviewed and get it right from the very beginning, and not just build code so fast and then throw it and see what sticks. That is a process. That is one process, right? Build it as fast as you can. Best of breed it works, but I don't know if you want people's financial or life support built by best of breed.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of, from the true genesis of the idea that became Cardano to now, I mean, we're almost I think we're over 4 years old, maybe even closer to 5 from the idea. In terms of like build, probably it's been closer to 3. And these are estimates. That's just off the top of my head. I mean, very well. And this has happened a lot. There are a lot of networks that started out with a white paper and then they launched a mainnet quick. Think something like Tron, right? Mm-hmm. The reason they did that is because they were able to reuse open source code that Ethereum had. And then they used the rest of their time to build on top of what Ethereum already had. Cardano is not doing that, right? This is sort of a ground up effort. They took some lessons learned from original blockchains and sort of amalgamated that into their first mainnet. But a lot of the core stuff that they've been working on is all brand new stuff. And so I take far less frustration out of delays when it comes to this project because everything is new. And if everything were to be released ahead of time and it were of low quality, I'd be more disappointed than I would be for excessive delays, but high quality at the end. So that's just my opinion, and personally.
I agree with that opinion. That you don't want billions of dollars in value riding on, random code.
Certainly, yeah. And this reminds me, the period that we're in right now for Cardano, no matter how long it's taken, reminds me a lot of the 2016 period for Ethereum, when it had been around for a while, the base implementation was there. We were starting to see the use cases, right? And I think I built my first smart contract. Wasn't even a dApp. It was just a smart contract that I was able to test out and try out. It was in 2016, I believe. And I was shocked at how cool that felt to just build something with something new, like new technology that very few people were using. But then I started to see within 6 months to a year, like thousands of developers now using Solidity and Ethereum. You had tools being built that are now amazing, like Truffle, for example, to help you execute and make, test contracts, deploy contracts, all that jazz. This sort of thing is going to happen in the Cardano space when we get these smart contracts. You're going to start to see tools being built. I have a feeling that Truffle might actually extend over to Cardano when Plutus comes. Just a thought, might happen. But I think that's the interesting thing, is that there's a community behind it in terms of the core foundation, like the Ethereum foundation is. And there are a lot of people like you and I that just like the project, are following it closely. And as soon as we have the ability to, we'll keep testing nodes, building dApps, doing all this sort of stuff. And if we follow that same model that Ethereum has done, it could be really, really good in the next year and a half in terms of growth.
It can be. And I would also like to add another thing that I've found very inspiring about the Incentivized Testnet is the community, as you mentioned, because we argued and we fight. You can look at the Telegram channel. It's a public Telegram channel.
Yeah.
We argue, disagree, but at the end of the day, we don't quit. At the end of the day, no quitters. They're still hanging in there. They're still going. And you can disagree and you can debate, but at the end of the day, you can have a laugh.
I'm with you.
It's great.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the recipe for success. You got to have a little bit of conflict to win.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to the incentivized mainnet, and I think the kind of things I'm anticipating seeing is that the right percentages will be there, the right incentives will be there for pool operators to keep the pools running. Mm-hmm. The right incentives will be there for people to stake their ADA, and it will work. That is what I anticipate will happen because of what I've seen so far going through the testnet process. I'm quite confident in the mainnet when it does launch, whenever that is. I know I gave you best guess earlier. Mm-hmm. I've wrote it out this long, man. I'm not going to quit.
Yeah, I hear you. And there are a lot of people too that aren't even in the space yet. If, some people might decide, hey, I don't want to wait around. But there are more people that can jump into the mix, as things happen. So I think, we're running up on kind of close to an hour, but I did want to touch on the idea that anyone can set up a stake pool or staking node. And I wanted to ask you, because I'm one of those people who needs to get on that and do it, what is the process for doing so? And are there any good tutorials and ways to set up that anyone could follow?
Yes, the best tutorials, my recommendation to get started is check out Alejandro Garcia's videos on YouTube that are made by IOHK on the IOHK.io or IOHK.io YouTube channel. Those are the best place to just kind of get an overview. He does go into great detail. You can probably set up 95% of your pool off of those videos, but remember, computers don't like 95%. They like 100%, and if it's 99%, it's still not going. It's not going to run. You got to do 100% step. So start with the IOHK videos. Then also check out the Stake Pool Best Practice Telegram channel if you need personal support, individual support, because there's a lot of very helpful people in there. And these are your competitors helping you out. And that's the magic of a test net. You know, a main net a year from now, you might not be able to find that kind of help. So get it now while you can. All right, so start with the IHK videos. There's tutorials made by Chris Graffinino, his pool tickers master. Chris has it on his GitHub, and Chris Graffinino, I pronounced the name wrong. And he has it on his GitHub. He has a tutorial how to set it up from scratch on a VPS, but it also works on a non-VPS if you're familiar with Linux. But if you're a novice Linux user, you'll be able to set it up. There are novice users who did it. If you're an intermediate user, you can use Chris's guide and set up the on any Linux box if you have a basic understanding of Linux. And then for your tuning parameters is Palderogi's tuning parameters on his GitHub, iLap. So go to iLap, you'll find his channel all over Twitter, on crypto Twitter, Cardano Twitter. CT is Cardano Twitter. And I'm just kidding. And you get those tuning parameters to get a Linux node running really tight. Like right now I got 2 leaders running. I got one over here on this green guy on this Mac. That's a Mac OS X node.
Nice.
And then I've got another leader running on a Linux node in the other room. Well, they're all in the other room. It's just a screen. And
nice.
Yeah, so between the IHK, Chris Graffinino's setup guide, and Palderogi's tuning parameters, you'll get up and running. Plus, there's a lot of other people out there. Once you get that far in, you're going to know all the other folks who've also set up guides on how to get your node running and optimize the parameters.
Sick. Hey, you know what? Rick, it might be time for you and I to build a collated one-stop shop video on how to get all this stuff set up.
That sounds like a good idea. I've been procrastinating because I don't know what changes are coming, right?
Yeah, I'm with you too. That's why I'm thinking about it.
So I'm anticipating the end of the Rust testnet is approaching, and the Haskell testnet comes online, and I think you and I will be able to gauge and say, it's time to make a video. Would you want to do it on the Rust side, or you want to let it wrap up and roll into Haskell and then build one on the Haskell side?
Let's roll it into Haskell, and then we'll do a nice long video about how to get this stuff set up on whatever environment you have, right?
That's a brilliant idea. That's a brilliant idea.
Cool. Because people like to go to one place and learn, and that's it.
They do. People are looking for that one-stop package at this point. Right now, if anyone starts on Linux during the Haskell side, they start on the Haskell side building it, I suggest go with Linux for now. That's where the most expertise lies, where you'll be able to get help, and it also seems to be a little bit more successful. But I anticipate by the time the Haskell comes out, you're going to be able to run it on Linux, Mac, or Windows pretty well.
Cool. What are hardware requirements for that? How much juice do you need to run something like that on a Linux? Could someone get like a Raspberry Pi style machine, or do they have to get something a little more powerful?
Well, the hardware specs, I looked at them. They are listed on the IOHK setup guide. There is a text setup guide. I referenced the video earlier. The beginning of the text setup guide is, I can look it up right now, but it's 4 gig of RAM and at least 50 megabits up and down. Network performance is more important than hardware performance. Okay.
Got it.
So 4 gig of RAM, a moderately recent CPU is going to work well.
Cool.
And so that's the minimum requirements. Someone is running theirs on a Raspberry Pi. I don't remember exactly who. Marcus Guffler's done a lot of testing on Rock Pi. You can run them on Rock Pis. There are pools successfully running on Rock Pis also. So, but it's on the verge. You've got to really tune it. You got to really tune the node to get it running on a Rock Pi. Great way to learn.
Cool. Yeah, no, that might be the route that I go. I might try that out.
Yeah.
Cool.
And you can test it on anything. That's an old Mac Pro. That's a 2013 Mac Pro behind me.
Oh, nice. So you got a node running on?
Yeah, that's absolute beast hardware. So that's 64 gig of RAM, way overkill. So that's why there's 6 nodes running on it, and it's barely doing anything.
Yeah, no, that's got plenty of room to run. It's got plenty of room to run, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for folks watching, I think it's safe to say that both Rick and I are optimistic, but still understanding of people's frustration in terms of delays, etc. Would that be fair to say, Rick?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yep.
Cool. And
yeah,
I think,
get frustrated too. You know how I am. When I get frustrated, I'll say it.
Yeah.
You can't hold it up or your head will explode. You just got to throw it out there.
Gotta let it out. Gotta let it out. Yeah.
But now I'm very happy. I'm much happier, much more confident.
Yeah, and I've been following Rick's, stuff with the Incentivized Testnet, and even though I have not had the bandwidth or the resources to go and do it myself, it seems to me like people are really pleased with the progress that's been made from day one to where we are now, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the Haskell testnet runs. And once that's tested, we're looking at some mainnet action, which I think everyone has been crossing fingers for. So looking forward to that. By summertime, we might have a really nice summer of Shelley.
I think so too. I think we
Cool.
will. Yeah.
Definitely. So Rick, where can people find you if they want to follow you on social media, on YouTube, etc.?
Okay, so my Twitter is at Richard McCracken, and just spelled out. There's no E before the end. I'll give you a link to that.
Cool.
I have a channel. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. My YouTube channel is Digital Fortress. A lot of my videos are how to use Cardano, how to use wallets, how to set wallets up, stuff like that. And it's more technical, right? It's just kind of technical stuff. That's just my thing. That's how I do it. And they can reach me on email at rickymac@email.com. rickymac@email.com is my email address. I don't check it that often. I mean, I check it as often as I can, and I end up with a lot of email in there. But so yeah, Twitter, Facebook, Richard McCracken, and you'll see a picture of me. That's me.
Right on. Cool. Safe to say, make sure you check that handle. No fake fraud Rick McCrackens, man.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a good wrap-up point, I think, is where you're going with there are people impersonating ambassadors, because the ambassadors are well known. So yeah, everyone's got to beware of those scams. It's happened to me. People have impersonated me on Telegram, and I'll never ask for ADA. I'll never ask for a secret key. I'll never ask for your Ethereum. No. I will not stake your ADA for you and give you all the rewards. We can do that in a pool and do it without you giving up your ADA, okay? That's right. Cool. You always control your ADA. Always control it.
Keep that stuff safe and keep your keys offline, please. Just doing my duty here to tell everyone, get your keys in your own possession, please.
I agree with that. And on the last point, where people can reach me, you'll see me on the Cardano Effect. That is a sponsored podcast. We are sponsored by the Cardano Foundation over to Cardano Effect, so that's pretty cool. I'm glad they got us sponsored. That was pretty nice.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's a new piece of news to me, and I'm stoked for you guys. That's awesome.
It is. After 15 months, IOHK sponsoring us, and the Cardano Foundation picked us up.
That's fantastic, man. Fantastic. Congratulations. Please do, guys, go over and subscribe to the Cardano Effect, Digital Fortress, and follow them up on Twitter as well. Thank you guys very much for watching, and stay tuned for another Cardano update as soon as possible. Cheers.